Hey, how you doing? This is John, and welcome to John's Long Box. Uh, am I live? It says I'm live. Just let me know if anybody's here, if anybody could see me. It says I got 5 viewers. Hey, 5 viewers. How you doing? For those of you who follow my channel, John's Long Box, I had a guest. Oh, 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 all right. I did something wrong. Typical. All right, since I got 3 viewers now, I guess I chased you away. All right, let's start all over again. Hello, this is John, and welcome to John's Long Box. For those of you who follow my channel, I had a live stream planned tonight with Brian Urso of Gideon's Mob, but he had to go to the hospital yesterday, and he's recovering today. That's his information to share with you, so he was very apologetic, but I'm used to talking on Wednesday nights. I didn't make a video today, so I thought I would filibuster a bit. And I sent out invitation to all the previous people that I've ever had chats with and see who shows up. So far, it's just me. Oh, we got a guest. Hey, this is RJ from the Fourth Age. How you doing?
I'm doing great, John. I'm glad I could jump on here and help you out. What are we doing today? Just talking about comics?
I had a scheduled guest. His name was Brian Urso. He was in a band, Gideon's Mob. He's a big comic book fan, and we just seem to be orbiting in the same circles on Twitter. And he's very knowledgeable about comics, and he's in music. So I thought it would be a nice twist to have a musical themed guest. And unfortunately, he went to the hospital yesterday, and today he's recovering. So like I just said, that's his information to share. I don't want to tell tales out of school, but the guy is recovering from a procedure. He's very apologetic, but what can you do? You got to take care of your health. So I just said, I'm going to go live anyway. I didn't make a video today because I do my Wednesday videos, and I sent out the invitation to anybody that's been on my channel before. So thank you for showing up, RJ.
No problem.
How's everything over there? Oh, I made a custom background for you since I figured you might be showing up. How's that? Can you see that?
No, I can't.
Oh, you can't see what it is? Is it the art in the way, or you just can't see?
I'm in the way, so my symbol's in the way. It looks like a hobbit of some kind in the background.
Oh no! Oh well. I'm just gonna kick us both out and put us both in just so you can see.
Okay.
Hello. Oh well, it was a joke that didn't work. I put a picture of the Unabomber up. Oh well, my humor. I was gonna do a comic live, but first off, RJ. For those of you who don't know, RJ is the creator and host and makes his own comics for Fourth Age Comics. And right now, you have a comic that's that's about to be released, right?
Yes, the Valiant Heroes. Well, we're trying to get the print files done for that. All the art is done, and we're getting the last of the coloring done now. After that, we have to letter it and send it to the printer. Although since these ones, you can either get them in the graphic novel format, all three of them, or each of them as a floppy. I'm going to do one at a time so that I can start printing the floppies off early, and then the graphic novel will come later. So yeah, that's coming along. It's supposed to be the end of summer, early fall. It all depends on the printer and when they can get everything done. And while I'm doing that, I'm also got Crom the Destroyer up on Indiegogo, which is keeping me on my toes.
Okay. Yeah, I did a showcase on the Valiant Heroes a while ago. I remember it was one of the first videos I did with the new system, and it just sounded terrible. I had to redo it. For those of you who are new, I showcase comics that I like, and the fact that I showcase the Valiant Heroes should tell you everything about the comic. It's a good fun, and Renzo is such a good artist. I had a live chat with him a couple of weeks ago. He's probably the most pleasant guy on the planet.
And his art is just getting better and better every time he puts his pen to a page.
He posted something today that was outstanding. Oh my God, he's so good.
Yeah, and the thing is that Renzo likes to stick with me because A lot of other people have him doing other things. They have him doing fantasy. They have him doing, sort of Western like things or other kind of stuff. But he wants to do superheroes. And I'm the only one who will give him straight superheroes that he can do. And so he wants to do that. He loves, well, I think Batman and Robin was the thing that he loved the most. He was a very much DC guy, and he loved John Byrne's Superman when it first came out in the 80s, all that kind of stuff. So those are the kind of things that he wants to create, and I'm giving him the opportunity to do that.
Oh, good. Yeah, good. Because I have a superhero comic that I want to send to him and have him draw it out just to see, get my toes in the water. I think it's something that he will really enjoy. I'm just working on the script now, fine tuning stuff. I think he'll be excited. I'm excited about it. So I can't wait to work with him. he's so I don't know. You just want to hug him. He's like the most pleasant guy I've ever met.
Quite honestly, I think after working for Richard, he likes just pleasant people. I'm sorry to say that Richard is a bit of a taskmaster, as far as I can tell, and he makes sure that everything just gets sent back, and the smallest little thing sets him off to redo this, redo that. Whereas I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I'm like, yeah, I can work around this, and I want Renzo to actually put his own 2 cents into the script, even though I give him a heavy script. It's really heavy on description, and I give him ideas of what I'm looking for. But yeah, the collaboration of making a comic to me is one of the most beautiful things. And if the artist goes in a different direction with it, unless it violates the story elements, then I'm all for it.
So let me ask you this, since this is a good opportunity to pick the brain of somebody that I respect your work. Do you give him full scripts? Do you do Marvel method? How do you guys work? Well, with any of you artists. And speaking of which, before you talk, I've got Mike Gustovich working for you. How incredible is that?
Well, the thing is that it depends on who I'm working with, whether or not I give them full scripts. I would like to give everybody full scripts. So for Renzo, he wants a full script to make sure,
Okay.
Everything's described as much as possible so he can envision it. He's someone who took his, I guess, the meat of what he did to prepare for writing or drawing comics is he was an artist for, I think it was, what do you call them, advertising and things like that. So he's very much, tell me what to do and I'll do it. There's a couple of other artists like the ones for Crom the Destroyer, both Nick Axe and Jim O'Reilly. I give them full scripts, but at the same time, like Nick would probably rather it the Marvel method than having a full script, but he'll work with it. For Mike, we had a bit of a mix up with Mike because I gave him a copy of the script, which a full script for the Rampaging Thor, which he was doing. And unfortunately, I gave him the wrong copy of the actual script so that some of the pages were only listed very Marvel method-ish. And he did what he could with them, thinking that was the full script. So, we're dealing with a little bit. We might have to throw in a couple of extra pages, and I'm going to have to rework the script in a Marvel method, which I find is just a challenge to me. So, there's all across the board, depending on the artist that I'm working with. I personally like a full script.
Okay, yeah, because I don't know what I like yet. I haven't done anything. I kind of wrote story ideas in outline format, and now I'm trying to come up with panel breakdowns because I want everything to go off without a hitch. So I'm picking everybody who I respect for ideas. So thank you, RJ. I need to point out that I saw it on Twitter today. I don't know if you saw this, that IDW is pretty much collapsing and falling apart. And somebody had signed a contract. I forget the gentleman's name. I feel sympathetic to this person. He just wants to make a comic book, and it got canceled halfway through the pre-prep, and it's not coming out because IDW is collapsing. And then somebody else had commented, take it to Kickstarter, take it to Indiegogo, take it to Fund My Comic, make it your own. You can't make less money, is basically the way he said, because the mainstream the mainstream comic industry is paying peanuts. So, I liked what I saw in the fact that like people encouraging this guy to do it on his own. And you're a guy that's done it on his own. What advice would you give if this person magically decided to listen to my tiny little broadcast?
Well, the thing is that honestly, I was told, and this was advice from several years ago, so it probably is no longer relevant right now. But I was told that, put your what you're looking for as money very low so that it looks really good when you get 1,000% of what you actually are asking for. But the thing is that, again, that was in 2019, end of 2018. It's no longer that economy right now. So I would say make sure you put in, if you're doing it first time, you put in how much you calculate this is going to cost you to get it printed and shipped out there. And if you don't make that money, then you can't make the comic. You just have to, with Indiegogo and Kickstarter, they will refund your backers if you don't meet that goal. And I think it's at that point right now that if you don't meet that goal, you're going to have to refund your backers unless you're ready to pay for it yourself. Because again, everybody's pocketbook is getting tightened up right now.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
sure, there's a lot of people out there, but that would be the main thing that I would say if you're a first timer. You got to make your money in order to put the thing out there and get it to everybody. And if you don't hit that, then it's going to have to wait for another time to meet the world.
Uh, I just realized I'll put your links to your campaigns in the description because I wasn't sure who's showing up or not, so I didn't know what to put in. So I'll put links to your Indiegogo for your comics. I'm a little flustered because I didn't know what I was going to do today. I prepared for somebody else. So RJ, I just have to laugh because I was like, you know what, I'm going to follow RJ. RJ's going to interview this guy. I'm going to go ask this guy. so when you had the guys from the Lotus Eaters on your channel for a live chat, I said, you know what, let's see what happens. so I wrote to them, asked them to come on the channel, and they were very nice. They were very pleasant. And then when I sent them a link to what I do, I never heard from them again. So there you go. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, they're great guys, but there's a lot of people right now that are taking off that basically came up with me or slightly before me or slightly after me. People like the Critical Drinker. He's going to go direct a movie right now, and
Yeah, he is booming.
Yeah. And Carl over at Lotus Eaters, I did the same thing he did to start my channel probably about 3-4 years after he did. So, he was very supportive of what I was doing just because I started with, Western civilization stuff on an entirely
Yeah,
different channel, just doing readings of things like that. So,
yeah.
he got into a lot of the stuff that I was doing because it showed something that he did, and again, that's how I got that connection. But I'm just a small timer now. These guys are passing me by, and they're getting into major world debates, and their names are being shoved around and in places that are making movies and deep political thinkers and all that kind of stuff. So I'm okay with that, though. I'm good with sitting in the woods and making comics.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, RJ lives, we don't know where. It's a mystery where RJ lives. He has one of those satellite cell phone things. He powers it up. He has to ride a stationary bike to get the energy going, and then he only talks for a little while. How is it out there with the grizzly bears? They're good neighbors, right? They don't bother you.
Oh yeah. Oh, great. I got my garden going, so I'm all in the middle of summer. I got some good fresh produce for me, so I love it out here.
RJ wears it. He grows a long beard and he wraps around himself. That's how he dresses. He's writing his fourth comic is going to be the fourth age manifesto.
Yeah, I think I finished writing manifestos back when I was in high school. That was a long time ago. I was writing stuff like that a long time ago. We're done with that kind of thing now.
Yeah. Well, after the fourth visit from the FBI, he decided to knock it off. I understand that. Yeah. Tank Ferret says your bunker is four bunkers down from mine. Yeah, they're in the survivalist camp over there. Unknown. We're not going to even mention the hemisphere out of respect for RJ's privacy. out in the back shooting down drones. One thing I wanted to say, RJ, is I talk about you a lot with my friends. I'm really impressed with, like, you talk about comics. You don't just talk about the problems with comics. You kind of talk about the solutions, and then you kind of have a hardcore cult following, and you've gotten so many like I have no problems admitting that I'm riding in your wake. Like you got Don Chin, you had Chuck Dixon, you had Eric July, Young Ripper on your channel, and I was inspired by that. So that I was like, you know what do I have to lose if I reach out to these people? And it's been a blast. I don't know if you saw, I had Chuck Dixon a couple of weeks ago. Uh, September 13th, Eric July is going to come on and talk with me. Ethan Van Sciver said he would come and talk, and I'm in talks with other people that I don't want to spoil it. So I have you to thank for all that. You inspired me to do that. Oh, we got another
great.
comment.
I wish I could do
the Earth's crust. What's up, RJ? I'm sorry I spoke over you.
I was going to say I wish I could do more interviews. That's okay. I was just saying I wish I could do more interviews, but really right now I'm concentrating on making my comics better, and that's what I do. Usually I do a live stream on Wednesday nights now, if at all possible. If not, then usually on a Thursday. And right now what I'm doing is I'm going over something every week, basically something about making comics and how to make comics the old way. So last week I went over lettering. Probably this week in a couple of hours I'll go over the last bit of that lettering from a professional letterer and his book. I think weeks after that I'm going to be concentrating on a couple of things from Will Eisner, because I did that video last week about Frank Miller talking about Will Eisner, and I really went back to the Will Eisner stuff. And when you see with the fresh eyes and making comics, you see so much of what he's talking about. So I want to do that because I got to make comics better. I got to make my comics better, because I'm always going on. Like I said, I always have to put my money where my mouth is. And if I'm saying I'm making comics now because the other comics are garbage, I have to follow my own advice and say, you got to make them better. You got to make them the way that they're supposed to be. And I'm going back to the greats, and I got to learn just like anybody else. And I don't have, the privilege of working at Marvel or DC and have someone stand over me. So I got to do it myself. And I'm sharing this with everybody. I'm not going to pontificate that I'm on high telling everybody what to do, but we're both learning together, or everybody that's in the chat is learning together, and how to make comics, or what makes comics great if you're just a comic reader. So that's the fun thing, what I'm doing right now.
Cool. I try to catch your let's geek out about comics talks. Unfortunately, like, they come on just as I'm going to bed. I go to bed early. I wake up early for work, and then I watch them the next morning on my commute to work. I really enjoyed that about the lettering and what you said about your interview with Will Eisner and Frank Miller, when Will Eisner said each panel should have a word balloon and one reaction, and if you start to have another reaction, that's breaking the rule. That should be another panel. I really enjoyed that, and I thought that was very helpful, and it actually got me to stop writing something that I was writing and reevaluate, was I doing this correctly? And I started to realize I was doing that rookie mistake of having a full-on, what is it called, a diatribe or in one panel. You know what I mean? Like, I was doing exactly what modern Marvel is doing right now, stuff that I can't stand. But sometimes you need somebody else to point out something for you to see. Maybe sometimes I'm too close to my own stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's a rule that Eisner himself followed, but when I was covering that interview of Frank Miller, when he was talking about Will Eisner, Frank Miller doesn't agree with that. At the very least, he thinks there are times that it can be broken. He never really went into what those were, but quite honestly, what he talked about was he gave Will Eisner, the first time he met him, which was slightly after he did his Daredevil run, he gave him some of his Daredevil comics to show him what he did. And he kind of just gave them back to him and said, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Can you imagine saying that to Frank Miller now?
Well, Will Eisner's probably the one guy that could say that to Frank Miller, right?
Yeah.
But you know what? I think I'll listen to Will Eisner. I'll listen to Frank Miller. These are geniuses, and they're geniuses who have different ideas. Well, I think Frank Miller was a contrarian. Like, I think if you told him blue, he's going to say red. If you tell him 3, he's going to say 6. That's just his nature. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was just like, I'm just going to show Will he's wrong, just to, because that's the way I am. I'm a young punk. I'm a young whippersnapper. But I'm not Frank Miller. I'm not Will Eisner. I'll listen. I'll listen to the guys who came before me. Who am I?
Well, quite honestly, what I what I noticed in that interview was when what they're most sorry, I don't know what happened there. I don't know how I muted that. But when they were when Frank Miller was talking to Will Eisner, he says one thing that they argued about constantly was that Will Eisner said you can't um, compare comics and movies. A script for a comic can be used for like sequential panels for a movie, but it doesn't bleed the other way. You can't take a movie and turn it into a comic, and you can't take the cinematic art and turn it into a comic. And Frank Miller was very much against that, and you can see that in his work, obviously.
Yeah.
But quite honestly, I think that after seeing what has happened over the last 10 years with Marvel and the rest of them trying to take the movies and to shove them back into the comics and make the stories that way, I go with Will Eisner. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And so that's why I would go with the Eisner way instead of the Miller way of making comics, even though for my first couple of books, even the ones being produced right now, I certainly did break some of his rules just because, I didn't go back and study that stuff as early as I should have. But yeah, I think comics is a medium unto itself that
Yep.
should have its own rules. And that's what he talks about most of the time, Will Eisner, that follow the rules of making a comic. Don't try to make something else. Don't try to bleed other things into it. If it's comparable to anything, it's comparable to the stage or to written prose, and use the language of a comic because it's a special thing into itself.
I forget who said this. I couldn't have been the one that came up with this. I think it was one of my friends, but he said Will Eisner was more theatrical, and say like Frank Miller was more like I would say like Frank Miller was more like 70s Columbo police drama, and it wasn't until like maybe like the Ultimates before it became like cinematic. So and what works on the TV doesn't work in movies. What works in the movies doesn't necessarily work in the theater, and none of that works in comics. So I think they all had their different views, and they all worked. I mean, nobody's going to argue that Frank Miller isn't a genius in his own way. What he did what he did didn't work, But what works for Will Eisner works for Will Eisner. What works for Frank Miller works for Frank Miller. But I do think they had different approaches. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that they do overlap in some way because, well, you listen to Frank Miller. He says that he stole so much from Will Eisner to begin with, and the ideas of the spirit, right? But the thing that Will Eisner did was he used shadow and light, and he used that from his connection to the theater, how they would spotlight something, and he does that masterfully in
Yes.
his comics like The Spirit, and that's what I think Frank Miller took from Will Eisner mainly, and it was because Frank Miller says basically he was a bad artist, or at the very least he wasn't a pretty artist, so he had to hide things in shadow. So a lot of people look at Frank Miller's stuff and they think he's gritty and he's trying to sell this hard-boiled kind of thing, when quite honestly I think it's him trying to deal with his limitations as an
Yeah.
artist
Yeah.
first of all, and
Make
then
it up.
that went into being his style.
I heard somewhere that Frank, you talked about the version of the story that I haven't heard, but he kept going to Marvel and DC, and they kept telling him no, and they kept telling him no, you're not good enough. And he did something phenomenal that is kind of unheard of today. He went home and he practiced, and he came back. I don't know how many days later, how many weeks later, how many months later. He came back, showed his portfolio, and they said no. And he just like that's, to me, like that's why he's a contrarian. They told him he couldn't do it, so he's like, I'm going to show him, I'm going to do it. And it was Neil Adams, right, that took him under his wing and finally got him working.
According to Frank Miller, that's the story that he tells, that
Yeah, yeah.
it's
They
it's
they they, they flat out told him you're never going to work in comics.
Yeah,
And
and well, the thing is too that I think the first he said, Frank Miller says that the first work he ever got was doing Gold Key comics. And I think it was the Twilight Zone. So he started off at a very low level doing just a small little story for something that wasn't selling very well at that time. And even when they put him on Daredevil, he says that that was the last straw for Daredevil. If it didn't work
yes,
with Miller and he was a no-name artist, because they were just going to cancel it, and he
right.
said, no, let me try. Right.
I
So
remember that.
he
I
saved
just
Daredevil.
showcased on that comic. That was the Death Stalker coming out of the grave, and Daredevil. I remember seeing that cover. I talked about this a lot in my videos. I would go into a stationery store. It was called Howie's. And this guy was an old man, and he never returned the comics. Remember the newsstand? You had to return the comics every couple of months. Well, Howie never did that. So he would have stacks upon stacks of comics. And among the stack of comics, I remember seeing that cover. And I will never forget that moment of having that comic book in my hand. Took it home. I read it over. I think I have like 3 copies of that because I just read it to death. The pages were falling out, and this was a guy, like you said, this comic was about to be canceled. It was his last chance. So he poured his heart and soul in that comic. That was an awesome comic. That to me is part of American history.
Part of comic history, and definitely, I think I don't even know who said it. It's the novelist that I was just watching a video about. He talked about there's basically, he said, 4 mediums that are distinct for America, and he talks about jazz as being one of them. I can't remember the others, but the last one was comic books.
Right.
It's a American medium, and it's different from the French version or the Japanese version or everything else, and it has its own style, and part of that style is something that Miller brought back into it. Again, that contrarian, that's certainly part of it, I would say. But again, it's a rough style. It's a style that grew out of, I think most of us are trying to, well, you're someone who's from New York, so it's a New York style, let's put it that way. And
Right.
so many of us are trying to pull in and to draw on those kinds of things. But yeah, it's comic history, and that comic history is Americana.
Yeah, I remember Frank Miller said in an interview that he would go and spend like a Sunday afternoon. He would go up onto a roof of a building in Manhattan or Brooklyn or Queens, and he would just sit there and he would draw all the antennas and water towers, like all that stuff that really we condition ourselves to ignore. And if you look at his Daredevils, when he's fighting Bullseye on the roof, you see all that stuff, and that's New York. That's Gotham. That's what Gotham City should look like. I always found that to be so authentic. And I wonder if that's like me being a New Yorker who's always seen that, and me being a construction worker up on those buildings, fixing that kind of stuff, but but I've seen that as a kid, because I don't know if you remember the opening to Welcome Back, Kotter, when you see that, as the song is going up, you see the trains and the graffiti, and then they cut to buildings and you see water towers. That's all the kind of stuff that I don't see that when I read a Marvel comic, when they're in Manhattan. They're just perfectly straight glass buildings, and that's not real Manhattan. That's not the gritty Manhattan. That's not Daredevil's Manhattan. I just love that about Frank Miller. He fills it with atmosphere.
That's something that I ran across a video that I was going to watch about making comics, but it was a newer video, and it had some of the current Marvel people that were working on, I don't know their names right off the top of my head, but it's very current day. This is how you make a comic, and this is how you draw a comic, and all that kind of stuff. And I had to turn it off. I really did, because I didn't want to get really, I don't know what you call, but I didn't want to get affected by it, because they were giving you all the wrong reasons of what to draw and how to draw. They were talking about, you fill up the background with all these things that are going to show the reader what the personality of the person is and all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking, no, it's not about the individual. It's about, if you're drawing backgrounds, the background is about the setting and about things that people can, grab onto and say, yeah, that looks like a real city to me. It doesn't look like something that's just manufactured in the mind of the artist because he doesn't have time, things like that. And that's what you get in a lot of your older comics. Me personally, I love Paul Smith's art. I think his is probably, if I ever get to draw in any real shape, it'll be a Paul Smith way, which has very limited backgrounds and very limited clutter in it whatsoever. But what he does put in is impactful. Like you said, it's something that, you're on the top of buildings, you're running from building to building. This is New York. It's supposed to be gritty. And again, Frank Miller did it in Shadow and Light, which is exactly the right thing. It's a background like the setting of a play. It's not just about this personal person, this one individual, or the person that's writing the comic. So yeah, backgrounds are extremely important. And it's one of those things that, when I did my map for Thomas Valiant #1, I took 2 cities that were real and I smushed them together on 2 sides of a river. One was New York, and the other was London. And basically it's a play off of the
Of Gotham.
original layout for Gotham and Metropolis, right? So that's what they were.
Right. Yeah,
So
that's pretty
take
clever.
real settings and do that.
Oh, that's pretty clever. Oh wow, I like that. A little bit of London, a little bit of New York, mush it together, and you get your superhero city. That's cool. Oh, yeah, that is awesome. I like that. What you saying about Paul Smith? I remember. I think I first got exposed to him. He did a Falcon 4-issue series in the late '80s, and I remember even as a kid, I said this guy uses the least amount of lines possible to convey so much. If you were to remove one line from a from a from Paul Smith's artwork, it would diminish everything. Oh, hey, we have a hold on, RJ. We have another guest popping up. Hey, he lives.
No, do I live? Jesus, what a pain in the ass.
Okay, I went live anyway, and we have RJ from the Fourth Age who jumped in. We were talking about comics, and this is Brian Urso of Gideon's Mob. He's also a big comics fan. You named your band after the Invisibles.
Yep.
So good to see that you're alive. You know, you didn't hurt my feelings. You look at you. You're laying in your bed over there.
Yeah, I just got back from hospital, and they pump you full of IVs.
The lobotomy went well.
It went well. They pumped me full of IVs, and then they gave me some antibiotics.
That's good. So the lobotomy went well. So you're going to be working for Marvel pretty soon?
Didn't even leave a scar either. Yeah, for Marvel. Yeah. Oh, please.
Yeah, you're going to be writing the new Kamala Khan. You know, after the lobotomy. There you go.
Oh, so bad, so bad.
So we were talking about just to catch up to speed. We were talking about Frank Miller and backgrounds and comics. So we might as well ask you. We've never met before. We just shared tweets. I guess I don't even know what you say now that it's X. We shared X's. How's that? That doesn't sound creepy. And I know you're a big comic fan. So let's what comics did you grow up in? I don't want to presume your age.
Well, I'm 50, and I grew up I started buying in the late 70s, and I was lucky enough to grow up in the Jim Shooter era, where every week something good was happening.
Oh my God.
It was just fantastic. And then you had big events like Secret
if
Wars.
You fall down suddenly, I'll understand.
What? Oh no problem. You had big events like Secret Wars that was awesome.
Yeah.
You know, and you'd have stories that were like would last 3 or 4 months, and that was it. They weren't like 2-year-long events that by the end of the damn comic series, now you don't know what it was about, you know. So that's what's great about the comic industry back in the 80s and the 70s.
Yeah. I know RJ feels the same way. I feel that the Jim Shooter years of Marvel was the high point of Marvel. You know,
I think that was the last time Marvel was the best.
It was the best, and I think Marvel. RJ, when do you think Marvel declined? Was it with 2005?
Well, honestly, I think the really big decline came in around 1996 when they tried the new universe stuff. But at the same time, yeah, Jim Shooter was the high point. And I think part of that was because, as he recalls in stories that he often tells, the people who actually owned everything, they had no clue what was going on, nor did they care. They just wanted it to make money. And it was his job to actually, make good stories. And that's what he did.
Yeah.
Jim Shooter always said that his rules were, number one, the books had to be out on time, which never happens now at Marvel.
Right.
You had to respect continuity, which never happens now at Marvel. And you had to follow the Marvel method, which definitely doesn't happen now at Marvel.
Yeah. Continuity. RJ, you did a big long talk about continuity, and as normal, I probably retained only about 10% of what you actually talked about. But you said that right now it's almost like DC has like a anti-continuity. Like you get invested in this, and then they change it to the new 52, and then you get invested in the new 52, and then they change it again to the point they might as well not have continuity at all, because you spend all this money on new comics and everything's just thrown out the window. Like, do you think that these continuity changing company-wide events are helpful or harmful in the long run?
No, I don't think they're helpful at all. I think they're destroying anything that you can sink your teeth into to try to actually follow the story and follow the characters. There's just too many versions of Batman right now, and too many people working on it at the same time, giving you different versions, besides the fact that most of them should be elsewhere, stories, stuff like that. And again, to bring it back to Jim Shooter, he's the one who he is the first one to ever write a story for DC that had continuity.
Right.
He's, he went to his editor at the time and he was doing Legion of Superheroes. And he said,
And he
I
was
want
a
to do
kid.
continuity because that's what they're doing at Marvel. And it seems
And he
to
was
sell. And his
17,
editor told
keep
him
that in
no.
mind.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, he was a kid. I heard somewhere that he actually had to work. His family needed the money.
Yeah.
And I will interject and say that I think that was a big part of it. This is a guy who had real stakes. He had to do this. He couldn't fail.
Right.
It wasn't just like a whim. It wasn't a stepping stone into other. Like, he wanted to do comics and he needed to bring in income for his family. So this guy brought his A game from day one. And RJ, didn't they tell him not to do it? And he did it anyway.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's what a lot of people have been doing. And you look at even people like Rob Liefeld, he had to, I think, pay for his father's cancer treatments. You got people who are hungry and they became greats within,
Right.
the comic industry, or at the very least, they tried to put high points into it and they put their heart and soul into it. Again, Frank Miller, people like that, they put their heart and soul into these stories because it's either you do good or it's canceled and you might not have a job and you
Right.
might not have the ability to support your family. So that's
we
what
were
a lot of the interviews that I covered is you see
we
that
talked
over and
right
over
before
again.
you got here, Brian, that in Daredevil 153, I think the issue number was the first Frank Miller Daredevil when Daredevil fights the Night Stalker. That was it. If that didn't sell, Frank's career was done.
Right.
They took a risk on him, and I was talking about as a little kid when I walked into the store in whatever year that was, 83, 80, 82, and I saw that comic. Oh my God! Like to this day and age, I still talk about that comic. Frank Miller banged it out of the park that day. That was a. Do you know what I'm assuming you know what I'm talking about?
This is the death of Elektra you're talking about?
No, even before that, Dave Michelini was the writer. Frank Miller was the artist, and I think it was like 4 issues later where Frank actually started to write. But it was when Deathstalker died. He materialized in the tombstone.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that was Frank Miller's first. He did Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man 27.
Right.
That was his first Marvel comic. And
but then the Deathstalker one, because was it 168? No, what is it?
153, 157. I don't know, something like that.
I think that's like 78, 79. What year that came out? I think.
Yeah, that was, and they told him this. Go ahead, we're canceling this comic. Do what you can, and now they're making movies about Daredevil, Netflix shows about that, and it's all because of a guy who brought his A game. He knew the stakes.
Well, when you're hungry, and you'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah, that's my point. Jim Shooter, he had real stakes.
Right.
It wasn't just like, okay, I'll go back to my day job or I'll go back to wherever I was.
Right. Well, I think that's my problem with the new 52 is that they thought, well, not everybody knows what happened in the 50s and 60s and 70s at DC, so we'll just start now. Well, you know what? Tough shit. Like when we started reading comics in the 70s and 80s, we didn't know everything, but we went back and read the comics, so we found out about it. We asked questions, and there's no excuse now. You have the internet. They can get any comic they want for nothing. And there's no reason why a writer can't go back and reread the past and figure out what's going on. It's just lazy at this point now.
My sister, she has 5 kids, and every once in a while, one of the kids will be like, "Oh, Roger McKenzie wrote that with Frank Miller. Thank you, Mark Boyd. Thank you." Yeah, the older I get, the names blended. But my sister said that she hates reading comic books to her kids because she's like, I don't get the whole story. I don't know what's going on. So I remember when they did the Crisis on Infinite Earths, I thought it was a good thing at the time. Like, oh, they're coalescing everything. They're going to make it easy for people.
Yeah.
And I remember the old timers coming into my store and I'm done. They, I'll never read this. And now I'm the old timer going, I'm done. I can't, so So RJ, Brian, let me ask you both this question. A 70-year continuity, do you think it hurts or does it hamper new readers from getting into comics?
I think it can be intimidating, but I think that if they're into it and they really like it, they'll make the effort to go back and read, the trade paperbacks or look online and find it. Because like I'll give you a good example. Like I've been buying a lot of Silver Age lately, and I bought the full run of Metal Men and the first appearance of Metal Men. And I just fell in love with it. But I didn't know Metal Men growing up as a kid. So what did I do is the only exposure I had to them was in Brave and the Bold. They'd be like guest stars and stuff. But but I had an interest in going back and learning about it. So I think if there's no interest anymore in old stuff, it seems like, other than the market. That's the thing. Like I can't imagine anybody mocking Stan Lee and Jack Kirby because of what they did. That's like sort of mocking the Beatles. It's not.
People mock the Beatles now.
Yeah, I know that is baffling to me. But like if you show interest in stuff from the shit, I still read stuff from the Golden Age and 50s. I still enjoy it. It has.
I love Golden Age, and I have to say Silver Age, 50s DC comics. They're a little too silly for me, But later 50s DC, I'm starting to really enjoy. I'm catching up on westerns and war comics.
Well, that's why I like Grant Morrison so much, is because that dude knows everything about DC Comics. I mean, he knows everything about the 50s and 40s Batman that isn't hip, that kids today want to ignore, but he knew all of it back and forth. So it would show up in his writing too, because he knew it, and I think that's what happens. If you show interest in something, you'll get into it, and so I think it can be intimidating, but it's not impossible.
RJ, same question. Do you think like a 70-year continuity would be a block for new people to get into comics?
Well, honestly, I think that what they really missed the boat on, and again, I hate to go over this, everybody has, but One More Day really killed the idea of taking anything and making it organic and moving on with characters. And you get stuff like the new Superman right now, supposedly with John Kent, that doesn't work because it doesn't honor the past. But if you have stuff like Wally West, that was, I grew up on Wally West, and I think that he was the Flash, and to me he is the Flash. And to go back to Barry Allen is a mistake within
as much
within
as I like
current
Barry
DC
Allen,
right now, because it was organic and he struggled with it and he became a hero himself, and it paid homage to the past and it pointed back to those old stories. And again, you want to use those old stories, not to destroy them, but if you have comic readers, you point back to those things. And so that's what I always did. I read the caption box and said, I got to find that comic because it points back to, go see this comic, right?
Exactly.
And for me,
wasn't that fun?
that's what needs.
It was it was like the treasure hunt.
Yes, treasure hunt. That's a good way to put it.
Well, I think the last time we saw that in mainstream comics, that where it worked, was Ed Brubaker's Winter Soldier. Because for years people thought, well, there's no way you can bring back Bucky. There's no way.
When I heard he was bringing back Bucky, I was like, this is the end.
I thought the same thing. This is so stupid. Then I read it. I'm like, oh my God, this is absolutely brilliant.
He did the impossible.
Right. And that's one of the rare times that you can do that. But like you said, One More Day, that was horrible. That was like, One More Day was everything that Stan Lee fought against. He didn't want things done for shock value, which is what that was. It ignored continuity and made fun of continuity, which is what Stan was a big proponent of. And it made like Quesada, like to me, is when Marvel started to go downhill with Quesada. He's a great artist. He's a horrible writer. And perfect example is One More Day, because he doesn't even understand Peter Parker, because back in the 90s when Aunt May died the first time, when she really died, that's when I considered her dead. Peter Parker was approached by this character, I think called the Soul Maker or something, the Soul Traveler or something. And he said, look, I can bring Aunt May back and I can just take a criminal's life, or I can take somebody you don't even know's life in exchange. And Peter said no, and he blew him off. That is what Peter would do. Peter would not ditch his wife.
RJ could explain the nature of heroism better than any of us, but to me, in a nutshell, is heroism is sacrifice.
Absolutely.
You know, and Peter was, you know, he learned the hard way that you have to make a sacrifice. To get back to one more day, to me, the biggest crime of it, like if you could believe in Mephistos and Galactus and cosmic cubes, there's nothing that can't happen in a comic book. Right. You know, even we just said Bucky could come back, but the fact that One More Day just came and erased continuity, it really made me think nothing matters.
Yeah,
nothing matters. The next writer is going to go, like, if I was to write something, you know, let's just say for the sake of argument, I get a job writing Spider-Man, and I spend 5 years building up this story, and then you take over, or RJ takes over, and just never mind what John just wrote. This is the new way. Right. That, you know, I think it's disrespectful to all the
writers. Well, they do intentionally. Like, they'll brag about it on Twitter. They'll say, "Yeah, I ruined your continuity. I ruined your comic." You know,
yeah.
It's not like it has even
this is canon now. You know, I don't know. I feel the Jim Shooter approach was the best, RJ, that every comic book is somebody's first comic, so we have to make that particular comic accessible.
Absolutely.
But to make it super dense with continuity is just going to chase away the casual. So I think there's a tightrope that needs to be walked. And I think the Jim Shooter years did that. And I think the Tom DeFalco years did that. But I also think the Tom DeFalco years, it started to it tip into a little bit of events and shock value.
Right.
Like RJ, it chased you away with
DeFalco's fence, right? That wasn't Marvel. That was just comics in general at that point.
Yeah. I think. Right. RJ, that chased you away, the Heroes Reborn?
Oh, definitely, because the thing that really stuck in my craw was that they told me at the comic store that this was the new Marvel. This was going to be everything from now on was this. And I thought to myself, all of my old comics are worth nothing now because they're not going to continue on with any of their stories. And that really stuck in my craw right there.
Yeah, I remember I had like an existential crisis when Heroes Reborn came out, because buying comic books I was the comic book guy and my friends. There was times when I was in college where I was broke and I was eating top ramen, and it's just to put this all in perspective. I used to shake that. We would have parties, you know, we were in college, so we would have parties. And the next morning I would shake the cushions and gather up the change that fell. And I would go down to the 7-Eleven on the corner, because where I lived in Albuquerque, a frozen pizza was $1.07 with tax.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you could always get $1. And that's what I ate, but I had money for comics. You know what I mean? And that's how important they were, that I would, you know, do without. You know, I was drilling holes in my belt. You know what I mean? I was, you know, borrowing clothes. That, as disgusting as that sound, but this was college. But I had money for comics. And then Heroes Reborn came out, and I actually was like, I guess I don't collect Marvel anymore. You know, like, I'll get the Hulk because that wasn't involved. Thunderbolts wasn't involved, but the Fantastic Four, Avengers, Captain America. Yeah. I was like, I don't collect this anymore. And then the fact of collecting Marvel without the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, you know, it was like an existential crisis. You know, RJ, you had the willpower to nope out completely, right? And you never turned back?
Well, at the same time, it was really starting to hit my pocketbook, because I think they jumped from like $1 to $1.50. It took a significant jump within price range right there. And, you know, I grew up paying, you know, at the very least less than $1 for comics, unless it was an annual or double sized or something like that. And, you know, to give me less of a story with something I really didn't want, and to pay absolutely more for it because they're giving me pretty colors and everything. No, that was just the last straw.
Yeah. I remember well, I'll talk about Mark Boyd's comment in a bit, but I remember you made me think of something at the time when, because this was Image was going full Brian, what did you think about Image before I pontificate for an hour and a half?
You know, I didn't, again, it was based on, there was no internet back then. So I was the comic book shop I went to didn't really get Image. They got Spawn, but that was it. So that was all I knew of was Spawn. And but now that I hear about, like, I've checked out other things that they did, but Image was off my radar at that point.
Well, I'll go on the record and saying the first offerings of Image Comics were awful, just god awful. I think it was super talented, super exciting, and super likable people. I got nothing against these people, and I think they had super valid reasons for leaving Marvel and I was cheering them on, even though I didn't particularly like their comics. And I bought them kind of out of like everybody's doing it, like enthusiasm. There was just wave, so believe it or not, when I was living in Albuquerque, there was like 7 comic book stores within walking distance. It was a really good place to be a comic fan. Excuse me. And I bought them all, but I wasn't enjoying them. And I was kind of like, the emperor wears no clothes. I was afraid to be that kid to say these aren't that good. So I quietly noped out. And then I noticed all that coloring processes, it made Marvel expensive. So I was really bitter towards Image, because like what RJ said, the prices went up. So what happened is they took the talent away from Marvel. They didn't make good comics, and then Marvel Comics got expensive, and then they changed Marvel Comics continuity. So I was really bitter against Image Comics up until around, I guess around 2005, when the Robert Kirkman took over, and then Image was I think the best comic company for a good 5-6 years. So there's my pontification about Image Comics. RJ, did you buy any?
I bought everything back then, quite honestly. Between I say 1990 and 1995, I bought everything. They literally had a long box for me in the back of the comic shop, and they would fill it up, and I would come in with wads of cash, everything that I would make, and I would just lay it down because I would buy everything.
You bought Image, you bought Marvel.
Yeah, and I bought Valiant and all that kind of stuff. Things that I was really like. Valiant, I really wish that was so much better. That was something, going back to the Jim Shooter stuff. I was raring to go for that, and all these old heroes and everything like that. And again, the stories fell down, the art fell down, and it just didn't have the same oomph that you would get from an early 80s Jim Shooter comic book. And so I was disappointed with that. And again, with the Image, I just bought them because I knew that they would be worth something someday. I was back in the I'm going to buy 10 copies of the first X-Men kind of stuff, things like that, because I literally every cent I made went towards paying for comics. And I'm the guy I was that guy back then. And when it got to the point where it broke me financially, and then I was getting less for my buck, and then that's when I said no. But yeah, I did buy a lot of Image.
So let me ask both of you, just made me think of something. Brian and RJ, RJ already answered. Did you guys buy comics with making money in mind, selling the comics?
Never. I mean, occasionally I thought that, like, if I was at a flea market and I got something, like I picked up a Batman #8 like that once, but
from the 40s.
From the 40s, yeah.
Wow, good score.
But for me, it was entertainment and entertainment only. Like I have my wife is so patient. I have a whole room dedicated just to comics. Half is comics, and the other half on the walls are guitars. But it was always, to me, it wasn't about making money. It was about enjoying it. Reading a new chapter of a hero that I love.
Yeah, it's funny because when I moved out here, there's a whole bunch of like retro places, and they all have boxes of old comics, and none of these people seem to know like how much comics are worth or whatever. So I've been finding some, RJ, you would love it. There's some old Superman and Batman stuff, pre-crisis stuff that I missed. So I would pick them up for like $2 or $3, or really good. And it's funny because my wife would be like, "You just spent like $45." I'm like, "Yeah, but this is worth like $75. This is worth $100." And then she'll be like, "Yeah, but you're never going to sell it." But
yeah.
This is for you when I die. My biggest fear is that tomorrow I go to work and a steel girder lands on me, and then my wife just goes, "Get rid of all this. Just get rid of it."
I've specifically told her that I'm going to haunt her ass if she just.
That's what I said. I go, "If you get rid of my comic books, I will come back from the dead as like a creep show zombie."
I told her she can get rid of them, but you better get top dollar for them.
I said, I don't care if you and your new boyfriend are on a cruise, lighting cigars with the money, as long as you sold those comics and got what they were, or you give them to my nieces and nephews. But if you just get rid of this stuff, Get rid. Oh my God. RJ, did you make money from selling comics?
No, that was never really, quite honestly. My whole thought process was, if I get to sell some of these comics in the future, I'm going to buy more comics with them.
Right. Yeah,
That was basically it.
I bought every number one like that I saw that I got my hands on, not because it was this is gonna be it. This is gonna be the lottery. Always like, oh, this might be a comic that I like. Oh, this might be a comic that I like. Like, if I saw a number one, and especially if a friend of mine was like, you're gonna laugh at me, both of you are gonna laugh at me. You know what? Number one I had in my hand, and I said, this is ridiculous. I said, this is never gonna sell. And I was angry. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I put it back on the shelf. How wrong was I? How wrong was I? I was like irrationally angry at the existence of that. They're making fun of comic books. They're making fun of Frank Miller. I'm never buying this comic. I still haven't. I still never bought a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic. I'm that kind of stubborn.
Hey, at least you're consistent.
I'm consistently stupid. Yes. Yeah, to the point I have a cousin who he's like, oh, I got into comic books. So we were talking on the phone, and I was doing a Zoom, and I was showing him comics. And he goes, oh, I got that. I just got that, and it was Spectacular Spider-Man 27. He goes, that's a key issue. I said, oh yeah, it is a key issue. Why? He goes, because it's a key issue. I'm like, well, why is this a key issue? Can you tell me anything about it? And he's like, well, I have this book over here that says it's a key. I'm like, but why is this a key issue? I said, did you read it? And he's like, I'm like, it's Frank Miller's first Marvel work. This is a piece of American. And then he was like, you know what you got to do? He goes, you got to iron it. You got to take the comic. There's an ironing process. You clean it out. You CGC it. And I was like, you don't read comics. You don't like comics. I said, you might as well just invest in the stock market. And we haven't spoken since. I'm not kind of jerk. I actually alienate my family members over comics.
That's why I look at it, because I think CGC was one of the worst things to come along. And I'll be on record to say that, because it took the fun out of collecting, and it put the absurdity in pricing. Like, there'll be people that actually will buy this new Marvel, like the 10th rebooting of Captain Marvel, and they'll put it in a CGC for 9.9 and then want like $100 for it. I'm like, are you insane? I mean, that just,
I used to be that pest on Twitter that when people would put a picture of their CGC comic, and I'd be like, crack it open, let's read it. And then I realized I'm just being a jerk. So I make a vow to stop doing that.
I've taken that further. I bought in the late aughties, Giant Size X-Men #1. I got a good deal on it, and it came CGC'd, and I videotaped me cracking it open, and I sent it to the guy who sold it to me.
I bought Avengers #4.
You gotta be able to
America, and I opened that.
Well, like, I'll give you an example. Like my buddy that I used to teach guitar at a guitar store. He has 59 Les Pauls, which are like the golden grail of guitars. They were worthless at one point. Now they're probably $500,000 a piece. He has 4 of them, and God bless him, he plays them. What's the point of having something if you're not good? So that's all. I mean, do I read like my Amazing Spider-Man 129 in the tub? No, I'll lay it flat on the kitchen table and read it. And then I'll carefully put it back in. But I'm going to read it and enjoy it. What's the purpose?
I say that to people. If you CGC your comics, you're losing the ads, you lose the letters page, because those kind of things are never, and that's all part of the comic book experience. The smell of the comic. If you CGC a comic, it's not a comic book anymore. It's a plastic slab. It's not a comic book anymore. And I have Fantastic Four. I have almost everything by Marvel that came out from Fantastic Four 1 to probably 2000. I got if you go on my channel and check my I thought I would come out and I'd do a video on Fantastic Four #1. I'd do X-Men #1. I'd do Dead, and I'd have 6 million subscribers in 2 weeks. Those videos got like 4 views because nobody knew who I was. I should have built up to them. I'm thinking about redoing them. You can see me holding my Fantastic Four #1, showcasing every panel. You know what I mean? Because that's
the oldest FF I have is #9 and up. I'm missing those first 10. I just. Yeah, it's probably never going to happen.
I'm missing 2 to 9, and then I have 10 up.
Yeah, jeez.
RJ,
But
what's
it's
the
like
oldest
the Avengers?
comic?
I'm only missing the first 2 issues of Avengers. But again, that's quite a price jump, you know.
RJ, are you still?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh,
Oh,
what's
both of
the?
you are beating me out way too much. I think the first FF I have is about 34. So, it's all what you could get a hold of. Back then it
Oh,
was the hunt, and that's what
yes.
I could never get anything that good. And like I said, I would go over quantity over something that would be, worth $50. I would never spend, even back then. I think the thing that I bought that was the most expensive the time that I bought it was the Iron Fist, where it's the first appearance of
Sabretooth.
Sabretooth. I paid $50 for that, and that was probably the most expensive comic I ever bought.
That's a good
Yeah.
comic. John Byrne. It's
Great series.
yeah. That's number 15 if I remember correctly.
It's 15, 14, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good comic. I remember the comic book store opened up in my neighborhood, and I was like, "Oh my god, a store that just sold comic books!" And I borrowed my friend Tommy's bike, and I drove down there, and throw the bike on the ground with 600 other bikes. And I remember he had a glass counter, and he had Fantastic Four #1, he had Amazing Fantasy 15, he had X-Men, and there was $60 a piece. And I remember scoffing at that, going, "Who would ever spend $60 on a comic book?"
Oh shit, I would now if
Yeah.
those were the prices.
Yeah, I'll find 100 and what's that, $180 for those comics. And then I walked home, leaving Tommy's bicycle to get stolen. Don't tell him he's a cop now. He's probably retired. RJ, I'm dying to ask you. I'm 54. Brian, you said you're 50. Are you in our age group?
I'm just a couple of years shy of you guys. I'm a little
Okay,
younger.
I thought so when you said that some of those old. Now, so I'm going to group us all in the same group. Do you remember when you were a kid? Your friend found X-Men. I don't know. I'm just going to make up numbers. Your friend found X-Men 137, but the last X-Men you got was 135. So you both realized you missed an issue, and it was like, you go on that side of town, I'll go on that, and you ride your bicycles to all the candy stores until you, give me 2 copies. You know what I mean? Because you had to take care of Carl because you were buddies, and you know how fun that was to hunt.
It's the hunt. It was the hunt.
Yes,
and in some aspects, it's still the hunt. Like I enjoy going to flea markets and finding stuff, but the problem is that those shows like Antiques Roadshow kind of ruin flea markets for comics. You're not going to find the rare stuff now.
Well, I think eBay kind of ruined the hunt because I want a comic book. Beep, boop, boop, boop. I'm sitting on my ass, and and 3 days later it shows up at my house. I mean, that's good. And man, did I abused eBay, for 20 years, filling in gaps in my collection. But there was something about I remember when Star Wars, when Empire Strikes Back came out, I had all the original 12 Star Wars action figures. Now we had to get the next one. And I remember I wasn't allowed to take a bus, and I would go, I'm going to Carl's house, and I'd go sneak on the bus, go down to the next town over to Toys R Us, and there's Darth Vader, Princess Leia, Bespin Guard, and then I'd go home, open it up. I had to stick it in my pocket, throw away the packaging, because if I came home with a package, my mom knew I took the bus and went to Toys R Us, put it on my shelf, and now I'm like, all right, now I need Lando Calrissian, and you still, the adrenaline was all finding that toy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, RJ, do you think we're adrenaline drunkies?
I was very much that guy. I remember because I grew up in a small town. Well, you only had drugstores and things like that where you could get the comics from. So I was going from drugstore to grocery store to grocery store. But I remember at one point I really ticked off the lady that was working at the drugstore because I pulled a Spider-Man out of the rack, and I got the best one I could find because people would pull them over. Found the best one I could find. She took it from me. She rang it through, and she folded it in half in order to get it into one of those small little bags. And I looked at her and I said, I'm just going to go over here and get another one.
All right. I'm going to tell you this. What do you do in this situation? Brian, RJ, what do you do? My coworker lived next door to John Romita Sr. I told the story a few times. So we're working, we're construction workers. And he goes, I know he drew Spider-Man. Is he a big deal? And I'm like, are you kidding me? He goes, do you want to meet him? I'm like, are you kidding me? So we both had off, and he invited me over. So I go to John Romita Sr.'s house. His wife is pleasant as pleasant can be. So Pete and his wife, they're sitting over there, they're talking about the neighborhood and the kids. And me and John, I'm sitting in the room where he drew Spider-Man. I'm sitting in his chair where he drew Spider-Man. And I'm like, if my smile could. So I hand him my Amazing Spider-Man 39, the Green Goblin, to autograph. He picks it up and he rolls it in his hand. And I'm like, I can't yell at John Romita Sr. What can I say? You know what I mean? So, he takes it, he opened it up, and he took a Sharpie and he signed it, and he hands it back. As he's talking to me, I'm like, trying to see if there's any creases. What do you do? What do you do?
No, you did the right thing. I mean, that's like a pantheon of the gods. I mean,
what do you do? You don't insult Zeus. I didn't.
Well, like I went the first time I met Stan Lee, I took like
first time. Ooh.
Yeah, I met him twice. I was lucky to meet him twice, but I got a T-shirt signed by him. But there was some guy in front of me that knew nothing, and he got Wolverine #1 by John Byrne signed by Stan Lee, which had nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
And instead of Stan saying, this has nothing to do with me, Stan signed it. There you go.
Yeah. Chuck Dixon said that today. He goes, Chuck Dixon told a story. I listened to him. That he went during Star Wars, when Star Wars fever was going in 1970, and he brought James Earl Jones a picture of Darth Vader, and James Earl Jones didn't want to sign it. He goes, because that's not me.
Right.
He goes, but you're Darth Vader. He goes, no, that's a different actor. And then they had like a little argument, and Chuck Dixon walked away without an autograph.
Oh,
and he says he always thought about that. Like, people will come up to him, hey, will you sign my new Warriors comic? Chuck Dixon's like, sure, I'll sign anything you want. I'll sign anything because they're a fan. So Stan Lee signed Wolverine. That good for Stan Lee is what bad on that guy, but good for Stan Lee. That I was getting nervous. I thought you were going to say something bad about him.
No, I love Stan. I met him twice, and the first time I met him, people were just. I'm a big mouth. I'm an Italian big mouth. So when Stan came in,
come on over. We got the Sunday gravy cooking.
When Stan came in, everybody was sort of awestruck, and I just stopped myself saying, "Stan, the man." And he came up to me, he pointed at me, he goes, "I like your attitude, kid." and I was a kid. I was probably 35, but I went up to him, and I swear to God, I said to him, I said, I never had to have the talk with my parents about drugs and alcohol and stuff like that, because you did all that for me by, in the comics.
And he Osborne, right?
Right. And he got this look on his face. He goes, that is the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me. And he goes, that warmed my heart. I'll never forget that, and
good. I get nervous when people talk about, I met Jack Kirby, and he was.
I would have loved to met Jack. I would have loved to met Jack.
I never met Jack. RJ, did were you a fanboy? Did you meet anybody big besides Bigfoot?
No, I'm a country boy, and like I said, I spent most of my time out in the backwoods, whether it be in this country or that. So unfortunately, the closest I ever come to people that made comics is
I
just
got a
reading
bolt,
them.
guys.
Okay,
thank you for having me on.
Thank you for showing up. I'm glad that you're okay. Don't worry about that. You convalescing after a surgery. Thanks for showing up. You're a real trooper. I appreciate it.
Okay, see you guys. Nice meeting you, RJ. I'll talk to you later.
See what you got to do, Brian. I'm
Nice
sorry,
to meet
RJ. Yeah. So what are you saying? You never got a chance to meet any of the big wigs, huh? I'm fortunate that I grew up in New York.
No, unfortunately not.
I remember I met Bill Willingham, and
and the thing is that I was just going to say that even though I wasn't too far away from you, up on the East Coast there, but still at the same time, it's just something we never ever would think to go into New York. We drove through New York, and that was about it.
You drove through.
I never got a chance to meet anybody.
Yeah, I met Bill Willington, and he was drawing, and I was just a little kid at the time, and I was a big fan of his comic, The Elementals, and he was promoting The Elementals, and he was drawing Fathom, and I remember seeing that panel later on in the comic, and I'm just like, "You drawing Fathom?" What a stupid thing to say. And he just looks at me and goes, "Oh, so you're smart." And I just walked away defeated. I met so many, at comic conventions. George Perez was the nicest. he made eye contact with you. He was pleasant as can be. You know, I'm glad I met him. Never met Marv Wolfman.
Although I have to say, John, now that I'm actually pulling out of my memory banks, there is one person, but he's just somebody very small that people would probably never even think about. The artist for what the heck was it for the Men in Black, which actually is a fairly expensive comic now. Sandy Carruthers,
right?
I think his name is. So it was a big deal at one point, but you know, I did meet him and actually got a drawing from him at
Cool.
one point because he was at a signing and he was doing drawings. He said, "What's your favorite character?" And I said, "Here's my favorite character," and he drew it for me. It's like I think it was Colossus that I had him do. But you know, that's the closest I've ever come to real comic talent. And the thing is that I'm just learning vicariously now. But the thing, well, I have met Chuck Dixon now, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I was awestruck that Chuck Dixon said yes, he'd show up on my channel. So
Chuck
him
Dixon
and I talked to him
he
and
showed
Grant.
up on my channel, and you could see the first 5 minutes I was stumbling. I was like, and Chuck was, and then he did the greatest thing. He told me a story where he met. Oh, now I'm gonna forget who he met, and he said he was dumb, and he calmed me down, and we talked. You know, the next day we were emailing back and forth. What a great guy he is! Oh my God, you know, isn't he he's the most prolific comic book writer of all time, and he's the most down to earth, normal guy. No wonder Marvel hates him.
Well, yeah, and yeah, I would say that was very pleasant talking to Chuck. And at the very end, at the again, the things that people say offhand that impress you, we started talking afterwards after our interview, and he was like, you asked some really good questions. And I'm thinking to myself, that is the biggest compliment I think you could have ever given me, because that's what I want to do. I want to ask good questions. One of the things when I was talking to Graham Nolan, I don't know where he's from exactly, but he has that, I don't know if it's called the New York spirit or not, but I said something completely wrong. And he was like, "No, you're wrong." He's like, I was talking about illustrations as versus sequential art. And he's like, "Nope, you're wrong on that." So
I hate to burst your bubble. Graham is that told me that I asked. I hate to burst your bubble, RJ, but Chuck Dixon told me that I asked good questions too. So
well, you do. Oh, you do answer. Yes.
So we got Logan Effling over here who showed up just as I was about to close everything down. So how you doing, Logan?
Hey, I'm doing all right.
We're live with RJ from the Fourth Age of Tom Valiant Comics and Crom the Destroyer, and Logan. What's your comic? Let's tell all of our many
Firewatch.
Viewers. What's that?
Firewatch.
Yeah, Firewatch.
Firewatch. I can show off a pin there.
Yeah, Logan and I did, and Fabrizio Aiello, we were hunting Bigfoot a couple of weeks ago.
We did.
Yeah, that was
find
fun.
Him though.
No, we just saw a shack in the woods someplace that had a shield on it that said the Fourth Age. That was it. So how you doing, Logan?
Doing all right. Playing some cards today.
Okay. Logan, are you live right now? With your campaign?
No, it's wrapped up now.
Okay. So. What is Firewatch 2 going to go live?
As soon as 1 is in print.
Oh, it didn't. Yeah,
it's not in print yet.
It's not in print yet. Yeah, I backed it, and I kind of. That's what I do. I ignore all of the notifications and everything. I just back it, pay for it, and then it shows up in the mail. I'm like, wow.
So probably September is looking like so.
Oh, good. Yeah, did you see? I was talking to RJ earlier today. Since you're a crowdfunded comic guy, did you see that guy who was lamenting that he signed a deal with IDW and the comic got canceled because IDW is kind of like sinking?
I don't think I did. No.
I can't remember the gentleman's name, but everybody was telling them, crowdfund it. You're gonna make more money than IDW anyway. I found that.
Yeah.
I was kind of proud in the way of the crowdfunded people, because rather than kick this guy when he was down, they were giving him some advice. You could crowdfund it. You could keep your money. You own the rights. I don't know. I think the internet's kind of a negative place and people are mean to each other, but
it is.
Here's a guy who's a mainstream comic book guy. Rather than saying, "Ha, you signed up for them, the enemy," they were like, "Okay, do crowdfunding. Make some money."
Yeah.
So we were talking about what the oldest comics you have. What's the oldest comic you got?
Oh, probably. I mean, it'd be a Dell of some kind. Maybe
Oh,
a Green Hornet. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Oh, that's
what was that? Was that 59?
1959. Okay.
Yeah, that's the one that comes to mind.
RJ, Logan, he's a farmer out in, I forget where, North Dakota.
South Dakota. Yeah,
South
Dakota.
Yeah, you guys probably have more in common than this New Yorker over here.
Yeah, I will say ruined my upper arms with farm work when I was growing up. I got nerve damage all the way through
Ooh,
because of repetitive work. Especially, I worked when we made the money. You'd work at tobacco, which that was repetitive stuff that you'd do. But yeah, I worked on a lot of different farms: cattle, potatoes, tobacco, vegetables of different kinds, all these kinds of things. So
Yeah.
I need.
not me. I'm construction of it, and it's funny. Like I'm watching, you can see one shoulder's bigger than the other because I'm right-handed. I carry stuff with one arm. It's
Yeah.
fun. I'm like trying to think, am I sitting on a slant? No, my body's deformed from work.
It'll do that.
What kind of farming do you do? I never asked you.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have any tobacco up here. It's it's mostly corn and soybeans is what people grow. That's what we grow anyway. Otherwise, there's wheat up here too, but you're kind of limited with what you can grow up here in the cold.
I see. This is something I know nothing about. Nothing. I'm typical new. I would start if you pick me up and drop me in a helicopter in the middle of a wheat field. I would starve to death. Oh, we lost RJ.
Yeah, we did a little freeze there for a second. I couldn't.
Yeah,
hear
RJ has a short window with his internet. I know you just showed up, but I was gonna leave. I gotta have dinner and go to bed because I have like a hard limit for an hour. So I put out.
I guess I thought it was 7 o'clock. I thought I was on time.
Oh, it's 7 o'clock New York time.
oh, that's the mistake. I forgot about the time zone difference.
Yeah, time zones.
Yeah, that was my issue.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming. Goodbye.
yeah. Good to see you, John.
Good to see you. Let's have another full-on talk. I enjoy talking to you.
Yeah.
And thank you everybody who showed up. Thanks for Brian. I scheduled this talk originally with Brian Urso, and he was in the hospital yesterday, but he ended up showing up from his bed, taking his pain pills. So God bless him. The guy's a trooper. So thanks everybody, and I'm gonna go have some dinner and then go to bed. So. Logan, I had fun with you, and Fabrizio said he'd like to do stuff again. So we should all get together and talk again. That was a blast.
For sure. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. And thank you guys for showing up. I'll put send me a link through Twitter. Oh, RJ's back. RJ. Hello? Hello, RJ? Well,
yeah, my internet's starting to go because of the storm coming.
Okay, well, we were just saying goodbye anyway because I got to go have dinner and go to bed. I usually have like a hard hour limit on talks because if I stay up too late, I can't wake up at 4 a.m. So thank you for coming back, RJ. And goodbye. And thank you for showing up, Logan. And goodbye. And I just thank you, everybody. We had a guest cancel, but a bunch of people jumped in, and then the guest showed up, so it was kind of fun. So thanks a lot, everybody. And anything you want to say before I close it up? RJ, send me links.
Thanks, and nice to meet you, Logan.
Good to meet you.
So RJ, send me links through Twitter, and I'll put them in the description. Same with you, Logan. Everything that's live, I'll put them in gladly. I want you guys to sell you comics. I'm not jealous of other people's success. I want it back. Tank said he made it back just in time to miss the show. Yeah, I'm closing out. Tank, thank you for showing up. I'm not jealous of other people's success. I think that's great, and I'm totally happy to ride in the wake of that RJ creates. I've been doing it for 2 years, and it's been treating me well. So, RJ, make $1 million, and I'll happily make 100,000 after you. How's that?
I wish.
All right. Bye, everybody. Send me the links, and I'll put them in the description. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye. I never know.